Have you ever made dua and didn't believe that it was accepted? And have you ever stood alone in the depths of the night, last third of the night, hands raised to the heavens, and your heart is whispering the deepest longings, the deepest needs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And have you ever wondered if those whispers of yours with a sincere heart reached Him? If those tears that you had were seen, if the prayers are heard? One of the most beautiful, uplifting promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran is the promise of accepted dua. وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمُ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Your Lord proclaims, call upon me, I will respond to you. Call upon me, I will respond to you. And of course, every Ramadan, many Muslims remember, because it's in the same context and passage, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. If my servants ask about me, I am nearby. I respond to the one who calls upon me when they call upon me. How come a lot of Muslims don't believe that their dua is accepted? How come a lot of people don't realize that dua is accepted, but in different forms? And here's the good news. The Prophet ﷺ, out of mercy, taught us something amazing about how Allah hears your dua. He said, there's no Muslim who makes dua and it doesn't involve sin, haram, or breaking up families, breaking family ties, silatul rahim, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept your dua in one of three ways. What does this mean? As long as your dua is not for something haram, as long as you're not asking for the breaking of family ties, the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that your dua is heard. Now it's accepted in different forms. Number one, it could be accepted in the form that you asked for. It could be an exam that you're about to take for school. It could be for someone marriage, to have a righteous child, to go for Hajj or Umrah, for example, to get a job. Number two, it's possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will store it for them in the afterlife. So I want you to imagine you come on the day of judgment and everything is happening, all these things are unfolding, and you need so many good deeds, and you find mountains of deeds, and you ask, what is this for? What was that particular deed? And you come to find out this was a dua you made for something else for a long period of time. And so you become grateful that you didn't give up on your dua, even though what? It was saved for the afterlife, the day in which you needed that currency more than anything else. But also, there's a third way your dua could be accepted in this hadith. It could be that your dua was transformed into a shield, a protection, so it rises up to the heavens. Initially, something bad could have been coming your way, and the dua ends up prevailing over it because of your persistence and the level of your sincerity. And so what ends up happening is your dua is a form of protection. Allah protects you from a calamity that was coming your way. Now, this third type, you have no idea behind the scenes what's happening. How many times you could have been going somewhere and a calamity could have been coming your way and Allah protected you, and it's all happening behind the scenes with Allah's mercy because of a dua you made that had no relevance to the calamity that was coming, no connection whatsoever. And that's from Allah's mercy. So if you could see behind the scenes how many things we were saved from, you wouldn't stop making dua, you would make more. So when you find out dua is all accepted in at least three different ways, now you know one way your dua could be accepted is also in a different form. So it may be that you asked for a specific job and you didn't get it, but your dua was accepted with a different job. It was better for you, better for your akhirah, for example, and maybe for your dunya. So the Sahaba, when they heard all of this, so all dua is accepted except the thing that's for haram, all our dua is accepted. They said, in that case, we're going to make so much dua. And the Prophet ﷺ responded, Allah is even more plentiful in his response. Meaning what? You're going to increase and have plentiful dua. Allah can always answer your dua. Allah will always be able to give you more. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kingdom has no limitations. There's so many stories of beautiful dua and how it's accepted in different ways. There's a brother that made dua for years for something very specific, and it never happened. But something better did. And as he started to reflect on it in one of the gatherings with the youth, he said, I realized that kind of what I saw as a rejection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what I saw as a no, was actually a bigger yes for something I needed more. During the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, and you see many cases like this in Palestine, in Yemen, in Kashmir, and other places around the world, when anytime there's a conflict, anytime there's oppression, occupation, there's a young girl who was under the rubble for a long time. When they finally rescued her, it was at least a week under the rubble. She said, somebody already brought me food and water. They said, who brought you food and water? She said, some man in a white robe. The story went viral because it was miraculous. It's some type of karama. What do you mean? Some guy brought you food and water under the rubble. There's also the example, there are many stories like this, an example of how dua averts hardship. And here's a story you can't really access, but sometimes you see subtle notes of it. There's a man who makes a lot of dua, driving on the highway, and he was supposed to take a particular exit, and because he was talking to his spouse, he got distracted and he didn't take it. Now, initially he was angry, and he blamed his spouse for being distracted. He says, how are you blaming me? قدر الله ما شاء فعل. Anyways, it took a long time for them to come back around because it was the only way back, and they had to take that highway, the exit. And so they came back. When they got to that area where they were initially supposed to exit, they found a massive, massive collision with some fatalities. And they thought to themselves, it's possible. The dua we made for traveling or for something else could have been the protection against this particular calamity. But how did it happen? It happened through something uncomfortable. You missed your exit, and there was another 20-minute detour, for example. And so perhaps it was the midnight prayer that protected you by Allah's grace. Perhaps it's the dua you're making on campus, between classes, at work, as you raise your child and it takes all your energy. You're just making dua all the time. But let's learn how to make dua more powerful. Our dua stronger. Number one, be present. Don't let your dua limit itself to your tongue. Number two, remove distractions. Focus. Number three, feel every word. Number four, connect your heart to Allah. That you believe Allah is generous and Allah will respond to you. His promise is always true. And the form He responds with will be what's best for you. Believe in it. Be optimistic. And so find the right timing. After Fajr, the last third of the night, between every adhan and iqamah, take advantage. While in sujood, make a lot of dua. Slow down in your voluntary prayers or when you pray alone. So make dua. The one who's fasting, their dua is accepted while they're fasting. At the time of breaking fast, you ate that day, you broke your fast, make a lot of dua. Keep making dua. And there's etiquette, of course. You start with praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sending salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, asking for forgiveness, admitting one's shortcomings. And then, of course, as you raise your hands, you face the qibla. And maybe, yes, for many people, facing the qibla, it's a time of prayer, adhan and iqamah. You have to be certain of acceptance, be in a state of purification, internally and externally. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, rahimahullah, he used to make this beautiful dua. He used to say, oh Allah, just as you protected my face from prostrating to anyone except you, protect it from asking anyone but you. In other words, oh Allah, just as you guided me to Islam, so I'm not turning to other people, protect me from needing other people, from relying and asking of other people, so I can just ask of you. Make a special time for dua throughout the day and night in your sujood. Make sure it's something consistent. Many people even start to write down certain dua. Be excited about it. As you do goal setting, it's really dua setting as well. And so before we end, let's make dua. Oh Allah, guide us, accept from us, and grant us consistency in the weapon of the believer, the fortress of the believer, and the healing of the believer. Remember, every tear that falls, every whisper that rises, every hope that blooms in your heart, Allah sees it all. He is near. He is listening, and He responds in the most beautiful way. What story of dua inspires you, whether it's your story or someone else's? What do you want to share in the comments that will inspire others to raise the standard of their dua?